The meeting room on the big spaceship was full of noise, and talking Admiral Yoon So-ra from the alien planet Alteria was waving her 6 arms around as she talked about shooting big guns from space. General Malik from the Centauri people was making loud sounds with his metal voice box about sending robot armies to fight on the ground. Every alien commander in the room had ideas about how to attack the enemy. Fortress Commander Kang Dae-ho sat at the big metal table and watched all the alien leaders make their plans. They were excited and confident because they had won many battles before across the galaxy. These were the best fighters from dozens of different worlds, and they all thought they knew how to beat the Vorthan Empire. The Vortans had taken over many planets, and now they wanted to take over Earth too. But in the corner of the room sat one human who did not say anything at all. Navy SEAL Lee Han-sol looked at the blue hologram that showed the enemy base floating in the air above the table. His dark eyes moved slowly across every part of the image, studying the walls and towers and gun positions. The other commanders did not pay attention to him because they thought humans were weak and stupid compared to aliens, who had been fighting wars in space for thousands of years. Han-sol had scars on his face and hands from many battles on Earth. He wore simple green clothes that looked boring next to the fancy armor and uniforms of the alien warriors. His weapons were basic human guns and knives, while the aliens had energy weapons and force fields. The alien commanders looked at his service record and saw that he had only fought on one planet, while they had conquered entire star systems. Dae-ho knew Han-sol better than anyone else in the room. They had served together for 3 years, fighting space pirates and enemy scouts. Dae-ho had seen Han-sol stay calm during the worst battles when everyone else was scared or angry. The human never spoke unless he had something important to say, and he never made big speeches like the alien generals. The hologram showed the Vorthan fortress sitting on a rocky planet covered with gray dust. The fortress had tall walls made of black metal and energy shields that glowed blue. Around the buildings inside were thousands of enemy soldiers with advanced weapons and armor. The Vorthans were known across the galaxy as cruel fighters who never showed mercy to anyone they conquered. Admiral So-ra pointed at the fortress with one of her long fingers and explained how they would attack from orbit with plasma cannons. General Malik showed how his robot army would march across the desert and break down the walls with laser weapons. A commander from the insect people talked about using poison gas to kill everyone inside. Another leader wanted to use gravity bombs to crush the entire base. All the aliens had fought wars the same way for centuries. They used big armies and powerful weapons to destroy their enemies from far away. They believed that the side with more soldiers and better technology always won battles. This had worked for them many times before, so they saw no reason to change their methods. Now Han-sol continued to stare at the hologram without saying a word. He noticed things that the aliens missed because they were thinking about big battles with thousands of ships and soldiers. He saw the small details that could make the difference between winning and losing. The way guards walked their patrol routes, the timing of shift changes, the weak spots in the fortress design. When Admiral So-ra asked if anyone had questions or suggestions, the room became quiet for a moment. The alien commanders looked around at each other, expecting someone to speak up with new ideas, but they had already shared all their knowledge and experience. Han-sol remained silent in his corner. Chair. Dae-ho watched his friend carefully and saw something in Han-sol's eyes that worried him. It was not fear or confusion, but a kind of cold calculation that meant the human was thinking about something dangerous. Han-sol only got that look when he was planning to do something that other people would think was impossible or crazy. The meeting ended with the alien commanders feeling confident about their attack plans. They would begin the assault in 2 days after their fleets moved into position around the planet. Each species would contribute their best ships and soldiers to the battle. They expected to win easily because the Vorthans had never fought against such a large combined force before, as the aliens filed out of the room talking excitedly about the upcoming battle. Han Sol finally stood up from his chair. His movements were slow and careful, like a hunter who had been watching prey for hours. Daeho approached him with a concerned expression on his face. "What are you thinking about, Han Sol?" Daeho asked in a quiet voice. Han Sol looked up at the hologram, one more, time studying the fortress that everyone else thought was impossible to capture. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his eyes were sharp and focused. "They are thinking like generals fighting other generals," Han Sol said in his calm, deep voice. "But this is not a war between armies. This is survival." Daeho felt a chill run down his spine because he knew that when Han Sol talked about survival, it meant he was planning something that would either save them all or get him killed. The human had a reputation among Earth forces for taking impossible missions and somehow finding ways to succeed when everyone else had given up. The alien commanders did not understand humans yet. They thought Earth people were primitive and weak because they came from one small planet and had only recently learned to travel between stars. But Han Sol represented something different, something that the galaxy had never encountered before. He was a warrior who did not fight for glory or conquest, but for the survival of his people. He did not care about honor or following ancient battle traditions. He only cared about winning no matter what the cost. The aliens would soon learn why humans had survived so many wars on their dangerous home planet. As Han Sol walked toward the door, Daeho realized that his friend had already begun planning something that would change everything about the upcoming battle. The quiet human had seen opportunities that brilliant alien minds had missed, and now he was going to act on that knowledge. The warning signs had been there all along in Han Sol's silence during the briefing, but none of the aliens had recognized what it meant when a human warrior stopped talking and started thinking. The next morning brought terrible news that changed everything. Scout ships returned from the Vorthan planet with reports that made the alien commanders very worried. The enemy fortress was much stronger than their spies had told them. Energy shields covered every building. Advanced weapons were hidden in the rocks around the base. Elite guard units were positioned perfectly to stop any attack. Captain Park Min-ho from Earth Space Marines sat next to Han Sol in the emergency meeting room all. Around them, alien commanders were arguing loudly about what to do next. Admiral So-ra wanted to wait for more ships to arrive. General Malik suggested a long siege that could take many months. The insect commander talked about retreating to find an easier target. Meanwhile, civilian ships were already running away from nearby planets as Vorthan armies moved to conquer new territory. Every day they waited meant more innocent people would die or become slaves. Time was running out fast, and the alien commanders had no good solutions to offer. Han Sol remained completely quiet during all the arguing and shouting. Min-ho noticed his friend was drawing small pictures on his datapad. The sketches showed building layouts, guard patrol routes, and what looked like secret paths through the fortress. None of the alien commanders paid attention to what the human was doing, Admiral. So-ra slammed her fist on the table, making a loud bang that got everyone's attention. She was frustrated because all their careful plans were useless now. The Vorthan defenses were too strong for a direct attack, but they could not afford to wait for reinforcements that might never come. "We are the finest military minds from across the galaxy," So-ra said with anger in her voice. "If we cannot find a way to win this battle, then no one can." The room fell silent as everyone realized she was right. These were legendary commanders who had won impossible battles before. If they could not defeat the Vorthans, then Earth and many other worlds would fall under enemy control. The weight of responsibility pressed down on all of them. That was when Han Sol finally spoke up in his quiet, calm voice. I need 4 volunteers and a small transport ship, he said without, looking up from his sketches. The alien commanders stared at him with confusion and disbelief. General Malik actually started laughing because the idea seemed so ridiculous. What could 5 humans possibly do against a fortress that had stopped entire battle fleets? The Vorthons had technology that was centuries ahead of Earth. Weapons Han Sol stood up slowly and walked to the holographic display that showed the enemy fortress. His finger traced paths through the base that other commanders had, dismissed as impossible to use. He moved with confidence, like he had already walked those routes many times in his mind. We are not going to fight their army, Han Sol explained in simple words. We are going to make their army fight itself. Admiral Sora leaned forward with interest, despite her doubts. What do you mean by that? She asked. Instead of attacking the strong parts of the fortress, we will sneak inside during shift changes when security is weaker. Han Sol continued. We will use maintenance, tunnels that are too small for most aliens, but perfect for humans. Once we are inside, we will not destroy their weapons. We will turn their own systems against them. The alien commanders began to understand what Han Sol was suggesting. It was completely different from any military strategy they had ever heard before. Instead of using superior force to overwhelm the enemy, he wanted to use stealth and sabotage to create chaos from within. General Malik shook his metal head in disbelief. This is madness, he said. You cannot infiltrate the most secure fortress in the sector with just 5 soldiers. Han Sol looked directly at the alien general with steady eyes. Humans have been fighting against impossible odds for thousands of years, he said. We learned that sometimes being smarter is better than being stronger. Minho felt excitement building in his chest as he began to see the genius in Han Sol's plan. While the aliens thought like traditional warriors who fought big battles with massive armies, Han Sol was thinking like a special forces operator who could strike at the heart of enemy power. The fortress defenders would be expecting orbital bombardments and ground assaults. They would never imagine that a small team could slip past all their sensors and security systems. The Vorthons were proud of their advanced technology, but that same technology could become a weakness if someone knew how to turn it against them. Commander. Daeho stepped forward to support his friend. I have seen Han Sol accomplish things that should have been impossible, he told the alien commanders. Humans do not fight like other species, and that is exactly why this plan might work. Admiral Sora studied the human warrior with new respect. She had dismissed him before because he seemed primitive compared to her advanced people. But now she was beginning to understand that human military thinking was unlike anything in the galaxy. The other commanders continued to argue about whether such a dangerous mission could succeed, but Han Sol had already begun selecting his team members. He needed specialists who could work together perfectly under extreme pressure. Each person would have to be willing to risk their life for a plan that most experts would call suicide. As the meeting continued, Han Sol remained focused on the practical details of his infiltration plan. He was not interested in grand speeches or military glory. He only cared about finding a way to stop the Vorthons before they could destroy more innocent lives. The alien commanders were about to learn that when humans faced extinction, they became the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Within 6 hours, Han Sol had chosen his team from the best human soldiers on the ship. Each volunteer knew this mission would probably be their last, but they stepped forward anyway because that was what humans did when their people were in danger. Sergeant Kim Do-young was an explosives expert who could build bombs from spare parts found in any building. He had grown up poor on Earth and learned to make weapons from garbage and scrap metal. His specialty was creating devices that looked like accidents. Instead of sabotage, Corporal Choi Woo-jin spoke 6 different alien languages perfectly and could copy their voices using special equipment. He had studied alien cultures for years and understood how their minds worked. This knowledge would help. The team blend in with enemy communications. Private First Class Shin Bo-ra was the best sniper in the human fleet. She had never missed a target at distances up to 800 meters. Her job would be to eliminate specific guards at exactly the right moments to create gaps in patrol patterns. Lieutenant Nam Soo-bin was a combat medic who could perform surgery while under enemy fire. She would keep the team healthy during the mission and also serve as their backup plan for getting out alive. If everything went wrong, the alien commanders gathered around Han Solo's planning table to watch him explain the mission details. They were still skeptical, but curious about how such a small team could succeed where armies had failed, instead of attacking. The heavily defended main gates, Han Solo pointed to maintenance access tunnels that were marked on the fortress blueprints. The Vorthons had made these passages too small for their own soldiers to use quickly during emergencies. They never considered that humans were naturally smaller than most galactic species. The team would enter during the night shift change when security protocols were temporarily relaxed for 15 minutes. This happened every 12 hours like clockwork because the Vorthons were obsessed with precise timing and rigid procedures. Once inside, they would not target obvious military objectives like weapon storage or command centers. Instead, they would focus on infrastructure systems that kept the fortress running properly. Du Young would plant charges in power distribution networks. Wu Jin would hack communication relays. Bo-ra would eliminate key sentries. Soo-bin would provide medical support and extraction coordination. The genius of Han Solo's plan was its simplicity. While the Vorthans prepared for massive orbital battles and ground invasions, 5 humans would slip inside their fortress and turn their own security systems into weapons against them. Admiral So-ra asked detailed questions about timing and equipment needs. She was beginning to see how the plan could work, but worried about the many things that could go wrong. If even one part failed, the entire team would be captured or killed. Han Solo had thought of those problems too. He explained backup plans for different scenarios and showed how each team member could adapt to changing situations. Humans were good at improvising when their original plans failed because they had learned to survive in unpredictable environments. General Malik remained doubtful about the whole operation. "How do you know the Vorthons will not detect your infiltration?" he asked. "Because they will be looking for threats that match their experience," Han Solo replied. "They expect enemy fleets and invasion armies, not 5 humans crawling through maintenance tunnels. Their sensors are designed to find big targets, not small ones." Commander Dae-ho supported Han Solo's strategy by sharing examples of similar human operations that had succeeded against overwhelming odds. He told stories of Special Forces teams on Earth who had disabled entire enemy bases using stealth and sabotage instead of direct combat. The alien commanders began to realize that human military doctrine was fundamentally different from anything. They had encountered aliens fought with honor and established protocols that had been tested over thousands of years. Humans fought with creativity and adaptation that made them unpredictable. Min-ho added technical details about the equipment. They would need simple tools that could be disguised as maintenance gear communications devices that looked like standard alien technology weapons that would not trigger security alarms designed to detect energy signatures. Han Solo emphasized that success depended on perfect coordination and timing. Each team member would have to trust the others completely because there would be no room for mistakes once they entered the fortress. Any hesitation or error could doom the entire mission. The plan called for insertion at 0300 hours during the Vorthan night cycle, when most guards would be tired and less alert. The team would approach in a captured maintenance pod using forged identification codes that Wu Jin had extracted from intercepted enemy communications. They would have exactly 4 hours to complete their sabotage mission before the morning shift arrived and discovered what had happened. During that time, they needed to disable multiple systems, create maximum confusion, and extract safely before enemy reinforcements could respond. Admiral So-ra finally gave her approval for the mission. Despite her reservations, she realized that conventional military tactics had failed and desperate times required desperate measures. The human approach might be their only chance to save Earth and other threatened worlds. As Han Sol dismissed the briefing to begin final preparations, the alien commanders remained amazed by the audacity of his plan. They were accustomed to complex strategies, involving millions of soldiers and advanced technology, but this human warrior proposed to win with just 4 friends and basic equipment. The quiet Navy SEAL who had sat silently during their first meeting had shown them something new about warfare. Sometimes the most effective weapon was not superior firepower, but superior thinking. The aliens were about to witness what happened when human ingenuity faced impossible odds. The infiltration began exactly at 0300 hours, when the Vorthan fortress was at its quietest point during the night cycle. Han Sol and his team approached the massive structure in a small maintenance pod that looked exactly like thousands of other service vehicles used around the base Wu Jin had spent hours perfecting the forged identification codes that would get them through the energy shields. The signals had to match perfectly with Vorthan security protocols, or their pod would be destroyed instantly by automated defense systems. The fortress loomed ahead of them like a black mountain against the starry sky. Its walls were made of metal that absorbed light, making it almost invisible, except for the glowing blue energy barriers that protected every entrance. Weapon turrets moved slowly back and forth, scanning for threats that never came. Du Young checked his equipment one final time, making sure all the explosive charges were properly concealed inside fake maintenance tools. The devices were designed to cause system failures that would look like equipment malfunctions rather than enemy sabotage. Bo-Ra adjusted her rifle scope and studied the guard tower positions through the pod's small window. She had memorized the patrol schedules down to the minute and knew exactly when each sentry would be looking in different directions. Su-Bin monitored everyone's vital signs on her medical scanner to make sure the alien atmosphere was not affecting their performance. The air inside the fortress would be different from what humans normally breathed, but they had taken medication to help their bodies adapt. The energy shields parted automatically as their pod transmitted the correct authorization signals. Han Sol felt his heart beat faster as they passed through the defensive barrier that protected the most secure military installation in the sector. One mistake now would mean death for his entire team. They landed near a waste processing facility that most guards avoided because of the terrible smells coming from the garbage systems. This gave them a few extra minutes of safety while they prepared to enter the maintenance tunnel. Network moving through the tunnels required absolute silence and perfect timing. Du Young had mapped every patrol route and security checkpoint, but the real test would come when they encountered unexpected obstacles that were not shown on their stolen blueprints. The passages were narrow and dark, with barely enough room for humans to crawl through single file. The Vorthans had never imagined that enemy soldiers would use these spaces because their own warriors were too large to move quickly through such confined areas. Han Sol led the way using night vision equipment to navigate the maze of pipes and cables that carried power and information throughout the fortress. Behind him, his team moved like ghosts, making no sound as they approached their first objective. The main communication hub was located 3 levels below the command center in a heavily shielded room that was supposed to be impossible to reach without detection. But the architects had not considered that someone might approach from above through ventilation shafts. Han Sol used climbing techniques that no alien species had ever developed. The Vorthans were naturally ground-bound creatures who rarely looked up when searching for threats. Their security systems were focused on horizontal approaches through corridors and doorways, dropping silently. Into the communication center, Han Sol quickly located the primary relay system that connected all fortress operations to their command network. He attached a small device that would give Wu Jin access to intercept and modify their transmissions. Meanwhile, Du Young reached the power distribution center where massive generators supplied electricity to the entire base. His job was to place shaped charges at critical junction points that would cause cascading failures throughout multiple systems, C to B. Explosives were designed to create problems that would take hours to diagnose and repair. By the time Vorthon engineers figured out what was wrong, the main assault would already be underway, and their defenses would be crippled Bora positioned. Herself in a ventilation shaft overlooking the main security station, where guards monitored surveillance cameras and sensor readings. Her rifle was equipped with a silencer that would eliminate targets without alerting anyone nearby. Subin stayed near the insertion point, ready to treat injuries and coordinate their escape route if the mission went wrong. She also monitored enemy communication frequencies, listening for any signs that their presence had been detected. The fortress remained quiet around them as thousands of enemy soldiers slept in their barracks, unaware that 5 humans were systematically dismantling their most advanced security systems. The Vorthons felt safe behind their energy shields and automated defenses. Han Sol moved through the facility like a shadow, using skills learned during decades of special operations training on Earth. He had fought in jungles and deserts, cities and mountains, but this alien fortress presented unique challenges that tested all. His experience. Every step had to be calculated perfectly because the slightest mistake would trigger alarms that would bring hundreds of guards running. They had no backup plan if things went wrong because no rescue force could reach them inside. The heavily defended installation, as the team completed their sabotage missions according to the precise timeline, Han Sol began to believe they might actually succeed. The Vorthons had built an impressive fortress, but they had never faced an enemy, like humans who fought with creativity instead of raw power. In a few hours, the alien fleet would begin their attack, expecting to face the full strength of Vorthon defenses. Instead, they would find a fortress in chaos with its own systems turned. Against the defenders, the quiet Navy SEAL and his team were about to change the course of galactic history. By the time the sun began to rise over the rocky planet, Han Sol's plan was working better than anyone had dared to hope. The Vorthon fortress was experiencing problems that its engineers could not understand or fix quickly enough to maintain proper. Defense's communication blackouts were happening randomly throughout the base, making it impossible for commanders to coordinate their forces. Guards in different sections could not talk to each other, and orders from the central command center were not reaching their destinations. Power fluctuations caused lights to flicker and elevators to stop working between floors. Environmental systems started producing strange noises and temperature variations that made everyone uncomfortable. The fortress computer network was reporting errors that made no logical sense. Wu Jin had gained complete access to their command frequencies and was now broadcasting false messages that sounded completely authentic. He used recordings of real Vorthon voices to create reports about human assault teams attacking the outer perimeter walls. The false reports sent different guard units running to respond to threats that did not exist. This spread their forces thin across the entire fortress and created exactly the kind of confusion that Han Sol had planned to achieve. Enemy soldiers were bumping into each other in dark corridors, asking questions that nobody could answer. The normally efficient Vorthon military machine was becoming disorganized and panicked as multiple systems failed simultaneously. Du Young's explosive charges were detonating in perfect sequence, causing controlled failures that shut down defensive systems while leaving life support intact. The Vorthons found themselves trying to defend a fortress with unreliable shields and weapons that would not fire properly. Bo-Ra had eliminated 12 key sentries with surgical precision, making each death look like an accident or equipment malfunction. The missing guards created gaps in patrol patterns that took hours for supervisors to notice and address. The Vorthons never realized they were under attack by human infiltrators. Instead, they believed their fortress was experiencing catastrophic technical failures combined with possible sabotage by maintenance workers or computer malfunctions. Commander Vextar, the Vorthon base leader, was becoming increasingly frustrated as reports of new problems reached his office every few minutes. His engineering teams could not explain why so many different systems were failing at the same time. The fortress shields that had protected them from orbital bombardment for years were now flickering on and off randomly. Weapon turrets were rotating aimlessly or firing at their own buildings. Communications equipment was broadcasting static instead of clear signals. In desperation, Vextar ordered all available technicians to begin emergency repairs. But they found that fixing one problem seemed to cause three new ones. The humans had designed their sabotage to create a cascade effect that would overwhelm repair efforts. Meanwhile, the Coalition fleet was moving into attack position, expecting to face the full strength of Vorthon defenses, Admiral Sora and her allies, prepared for a long, difficult battle that would cost many lives on both sides. But as their ships approached the fortress, their sensors detected something unexpected. The enemy defensive systems were operating at less than 30% efficiency, and their communication networks were completely unreliable. Han Sol's team continued their work inside the fortress, moving through maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts. Like ghosts, Subin had treated minor injuries and helped coordinate their movements while monitoring enemy response patterns. The Vorthons were reacting exactly as Han Sol had predicted. They were so focused on trying to understand their technical problems that they never considered the possibility of human infiltrators. Their rigid military thinking made them vulnerable to unconventional tactics. As more systems failed throughout the fortress, enemy morale began to collapse. Soldiers who had been confident in their advanced technology started to doubt whether their defenses could protect them from attack. The automated defense turrets that should have destroyed approaching enemy ships were now firing randomly at empty space or completely offline. Missile launchers were experiencing targeting failures that made accurate shots impossible. Energy shields designed to deflect orbital bombardment were creating gaps that would allow enemy forces to reach the surface. Shield generators were overheating and shutting down for cooling cycles that left critical areas exposed inside the command center. Vorthon officers were shouting conflicting orders as they tried to respond to multiple crises simultaneously. Nobody knew which problems to prioritize because everything seemed equally urgent and dangerous. Han Sol checked his watch and saw that they had been inside the fortress for 3 hours and 47 minutes. In 13 minutes, the Coalition fleet would begin their assault, expecting to find organized resistance instead of complete chaos. The quiet. Navy SEAL who had sat silently during the original briefing had accomplished something that entire battle fleets had failed to achieve. He had found the weak points in an advanced alien fortress and exploited them using nothing but human creativity and determination as explosions began to echo through the corridors and emergency alarms started blaring throughout the base. Han Sol knew it was time for his team to extract before the final phase of the battle began. The hardest part of their mission was about to begin. The Coalition fleet began their assault. Just as Han Sol's team was preparing to extract from the fortress, Admiral Sora and her commanders watched in amazement as their sensors showed Vorthon defenses in complete disarray. Energy shields that should have stopped. Their plasma cannons were flickering weakly or completely offline. Automated turrets were firing at random targets or spinning uselessly without power. Missile defense systems were launching weapons that exploded harmlessly in empty space. Instead of the fierce resistance they had expected, the alien fleet found themselves attacking a fortress that could barely defend itself. Enemy commanders were issuing contradictory orders over communication channels that kept cutting out. At critical moments, Han Sol led his team through the maintenance tunnels toward their extraction point as explosions from the orbital bombardment shook dust from the walls around them. They had to move quickly before the fortress structure became too damaged for safe passage. Du Young detonated his final charges in the main power plant, causing a controlled shutdown that left most of the base running on emergency power only. The remaining defensive systems went offline one by one as backup. Generators failed under the increased load. Wu Jin broadcast one last false message, ordering all Vorthon forces to retreat to underground bunkers. This caused mass confusion as soldiers abandoned their defensive positions and ran for shelter that did not exist. Bora provided covering fire as the team moved through areas where panicked guards were running in all directions. Enemy soldiers were so focused on the falling ceiling tiles and failing life support systems that they barely noticed. 5 humans in maintenance uniforms, Subin treated a minor injury to Du Young's arm, where falling debris had cut through his protective gear. She also monitored the team's oxygen levels to make sure they could survive the changed atmosphere as ventilation systems failed. The fortress was collapsing around them both from the orbital bombardment and the cascading system failures that Han Sol's sabotage had created. What had been the most secure military installation in the sector was now becoming a death trap for its own defenders. Commander Vextar tried desperately to coordinate a defense, but his communication systems were completely unreliable, and his defensive weapons would not respond to targeting commands. He realized too late that his fortress had been infiltrated and sabotaged from within coalition ground forces, landed on the planet expecting heavy resistance, but found Vorthon's soldiers surrendering rather than continuing to fight in a base where nothing worked properly. The advanced alien warriors were defeated by equipment failures they could not understand. Han Sol's team reached their extraction point just as coalition Marines were securing the outer perimeter. The humans emerged from a waste disposal tunnel, looking like ordinary maintenance workers except for the satisfied expressions on their faces. Admiral So-Ra was monitoring the battle from her flagship when reports began arriving about the rapid Vorthon's surrender. She had expected to lose many ships and thousands of soldiers in a long, difficult siege. Instead, the entire fortress had fallen in less than 2 hours. The alien commanders initially credited their victory to superior firepower and excellent tactical coordination. They celebrated with speeches about galactic unity and military excellence, while completely unaware of what had really happened. It was not until after the battle that intelligence officers discovered evidence of the human infiltration mission, small devices attached to communication equipment, explosive residue in power distribution centers, guard posts abandoned at precisely timed intervals. When Admiral So-Ra learned the truth about how 5 humans had single-handedly disabled the most advanced fortress in the sector, she immediately requested a meeting with Han Sol. She found him quietly cleaning his equipment in the small quarters assigned to human personnel. "How did you know it would work?" she asked with genuine curiosity and respect. Han Sol looked up from his gear with the same calm expression he had worn during that first briefing when everyone else was making grand plans about orbital bombardments and ground assaults. Humans have been fighting against impossible odds for thousands of years, he replied in his quiet, steady voice. "We learned that sometimes the best way to win is not to be stronger or faster, but to be smarter and more unpredictable." So-Ra realized that her people and all the other alien species had been thinking about warfare in the wrong way. They focused on building bigger weapons and training larger armies, while humans had developed something much more dangerous: the ability to adapt and improvise. The battle became legendary throughout the galaxy, not because of the size of the forces involved or the advanced technology that was used, but because it demonstrated that human military thinking was unlike anything other species had encountered, while aliens fought with honor and established protocols that had been tested over centuries. Humans fought with creativity and flexibility that made them impossible to predict or counter effectively. News of the victory spread quickly through space as other worlds learned that Earth would never be conquered. The quiet Navy SEAL who had sat silently during military briefings had shown the galaxy why humans were the most dangerous warriors anyone had ever encountered. Sometimes the most frightening warning sign was not shouting or threats, but the calm, Silence of a human who was calculating how to turn impossible odds into certain victory. The aliens had learned too late that when humans stopped talking and started thinking, the entire balance of power could change. Han Solo returned to his duties, without seeking recognition or glory, because that was not why he fought. He had volunteered for an impossible mission, not for personal fame, but to protect innocent people from conquest and slavery. The galaxy would never be the same, because 5. Humans with basic equipment had proven that advanced technology and superior numbers meant nothing when faced with human determination and ingenuity.